remember a very delicious chicken dish that he made, and remember remarking, this guy can really cook too.
He lived alone, but his table could seat 12.
Yes.
So I don't know if you heard the omelet story before. Oh, this is pretty amazing.
When it was Easter sunrise breakfast, he would do on order omelets for everybody.
And he had little menu cards where you could tick off what ingredients you wanted in your omelets.
Curtis's paella is famous with shrimp and scallops and all kinds of seafood in it. And it was very Curtis.
Open arms, anybody come. He always had so much food.
Mm-hmm.
I met Curtis the day he drove up our driveway at 633 Shady Lawn Road. And then he got out and he was tall. Now, granted, I was small, but he was really tall because he was taller than both my mom and dad, and they were tall.
Curtis hadn't been able to find an apartment, and mom and dad were willing to rent to him. And so that's how he came into our lives.
At the time when they were friends, that wasn't necessarily an accepted relationship, having an African American and all of us, his family.
It's unfortunately too rare that you get to have a close relationship with an older Black African man.
We were privileged, I think, to really get to know him in that way through the church.
And it was totally because he was so welcoming, you know.
Absolutely.
I was thinking about the stuff he participated in. Those father-like events were certainly coaching basketball. He and our father formed a duo team of coaches. So then they kept doing that for Andy and I. And so they were always our coaches in basketball.
Our daughter went to a school that had Grandparents' Day. So Curtis would be our daughter's grandfather.
We were very clear that as white parents, we couldn't provide everything a Black boy needs to learn. So Curtis was one of his mentors, I'd say. Yeah.
He was nobody's fool. I mean, he really understood social injustice, issues of apartheid in South Africa, and desegregation in Chapel Hill, and racism's ugly self wherever it showed up.
I remember asking him once what it was like to be a student in Iowa, and he didn't really want to talk about it.
You know, the reality is my dad said that he didn't think that the chemistry department was very supportive of him. Yeah, and that's why he got a master's with mine. My dad didn't have any choice in that, really.
During the mid-'80s, the anti-apartheid boycotts and actions against the South African government's continued horrific oppression of Black people was kind of ramping up. And Curtis was very much a part of that. So we got word that Curtis had gone up to Washington, D.C. with a lot of people and protested outside the South African embassy and had gotten arrested in doing civil disobedience.
I wish I would have asked him more about his growing up and his Alabama experience and his experience being in New Haven and then at UNC. It's something. He lived that whole civil rights history.
But my dad said he never complained. He never, ever complained about what he had to face. And that's really remarkable when you think about the obstacles that he had to come up against and the fact that he made it.
When he came to Chapel Hill, he initially said he was going to be here 1 year.
Because he didn't really want to live in the South. Yeah.
And Chapel Hill and UNC became, a real home for him, and he loved it here.
I've wondered a few times how he would feel about the Black Lives Matter movement now, the George Floyd murder, and I'm sure he would be the last person to be surprised, but at the same time, he would have a good word for us right now about how to process and think about moving forward.
He was very quiet, very modest person in many ways, but I think he would be thrilled to see that we are making great strides to improve training of underrepresented minorities, which is something very near and dear to his heart.
I think Curtis would be happy that the work of racial reconciliation has continued in the church.
If you want to know how Curtis would want to be remembered, I think it would be in a very unassuming way. But if I want to remember him, it's probably in a very assuming way. And Curtis was just a unique individual. And he loved you no matter what. And it didn't matter how badly you might have screwed up. He wasn't going to hold that against you. He was going to be there and he was going to stand with you.
He epitomized what he was trying to teach the world, that it's possible for everybody to have care and concern about other people.
And that's a rare human being.
Curtis was a very intelligent man and a really good problem solver.
I miss him. I really miss him.
He was really into the Church of the Reconciliation. So he invited us down there, and it was very nice of Curtis. And
You've probably heard this from other people too, about how much he loved UNC basketball. Totally a Tar Heel.
Even though he was single, he bought 2 tickets to Carolina basketball
Season
games.
tickets.
And they were like 4th row.
Really good tickets.
He may have been on the track team. I remember when I got to know him better here, he told me he had run a 4-minute mile.
When it came time for us to buy our dining room table, we bought the same one, the same chairs, to remind us of Curtis. Over there.
It's over there. Yeah, we still
Yeah.
have it in the room there.
Yeah.
Yeah.